to the recording device. And, okay, there we go. So, okay, so anyway, I just lost you guys. Wait a minute. Why did I just lose? That's distressing. Oh well. Anyway, so what he did, and again, I'll just start from the beginning since I'm now recording. So Professor David Ettinger is going to present on Thursday night, and he's going to talk about the substance of conducting scholarly and legal research, mostly scholarly research. Professor Larry Ross is also going to join that webinar, that WebEx session. And Professor Larry Ross is our law librarian. He teaches legal research and writing here on campus. And so he's going to talk about doing legal research, and Professor Ettinger is going to talk about just doing scholarly research. But again, they'll talk about the substance of it, how to choose a topic, how to narrow it, how to focus on a topic, how to select the proper resources to help you to learn more about that topic. And then he will talk about the logistics of doing research. So he'll share his screen with you the way that we can do on WebEx, and he'll actually show you how to navigate your way through the library resources. There are many library resources that are devoted specifically to distance students. I mean, on-campus students can access them as well, of course, but they were really created for distance students. So we've got this whole online array of resources that are there for you to make sure that online students don't in any way, don't miss out on anything. They don't miss out on any of the library resources that are available to on-campus students. So he'll talk to you about that and talk to you a little bit about the resources that are there. And then, as I said, also Professor Ross will be there, and he'll talk about the law resources that are at the Gelman Library. So the Gelman Library is the main GW library. The Jacob Burns Law Library is the law library. Larry Ross is a librarian at the Jacob Burns Law Library. As GW students, you have complete and full access to the Gelman Library. You have limited access to the law library because the law library is really for JD students, for law students. But just because we have a good relationship and because the law school really likes the paralegal program, and they like paralegals, and they have an interest in wanting to see paralegals get a good education, they share their library with us, which is really they just do it like out of the kindness of their hearts. They don't have to. We don't have any real rights to that library, but they share the library with our paralegals, and you do have access to that library, but not to all of the resources. You have access to all of the Gelman resources. So. And it's really neat. I mean, with your GW ID, with your GW email address, you get access to a lot of materials, scholarly materials, that are not at all available to the general public. So you get access to some really cool protected materials. It's all free. A lot of articles that most people have to pay for, you get for free. It's all available to you for free. And we have a consortium. We're part of a consortium of libraries. So you get access not only to the GW libraries, but also Georgetown, American Catholic. There's a whole bunch of libraries. David Ettinger will outline those for you. So even if GW doesn't have a resource, you can, but like say GW doesn't have it, but Georgetown does, you can get that resource through the GW library. So David will tell you a lot more about that. And he's very interactive. So when you come on Thursday, be ready to talk and interact with him, because he's going to call on you and he's going to interact with you. But he's a great presenter and a great guy, and you're gonna really enjoy the session. So that's the primary thing I wanted to just let you know about that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to post in the Professors Forum some of the links to some of the resources that Professor Ettinger will talk about. They actually already exist in our course. They're already there under resources, but I'm going to repost them just so that you have easy access to them and you know exactly where they are. And then Professor Ettinger asked me to ask you if you had any specific questions that you wanted him to address at his presentation, to email me, and then I'll email them to him, and I'll copy you on it so that you'll have his contact directly. But anyway, any questions that you want him to address, you can send them to me in advance, and he'll be sure to address those questions at his webinar. But if not, he'll just go over his regular presentation, so you'll have access to all of that. So I'm going to unmute everyone. So do any of you have any questions about any of that?
The only question I have is, do we get on this particular WebEx, or will there be another WebEx classroom, or how does all that work?
That's a good question. It's this WebEx.
Okay.
So I can make, I'll start the meeting, and then I'll just turn the meeting controls over to Professor Ettinger and Professor Ross. So you're going to log on exactly like you do for this one.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anybody else have any questions about that, the webinar or anything?
I do.
Yeah.
Is there any way, I know you said that he would be sharing his screen with us. Is there any way that we could log into whatever website he's on and sort of like do it with him like as we go, or do we not have access to that yet?
You know, that's a really good question. So I don't know the answer to that. But that's a if you can, you know, that's a really good idea. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write to Professor Ettinger in advance, and I'm going to ask him, is there a way that I'm writing this down, that participants can log on? I mean, you know, now that I think about it, like what you could do is you could make your screen, you know how you can make your screen, you can shrink it so it only takes up half of your actual monitor space, and then you could open up another screen. You could be doing two screens at once, but there might be another way for him to do that. That's a very good idea.
Okay.
So I'll talk to him about that.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and so good. Anything else? Any other questions about the webinar? No? All right, good. Okay, I'm going to mute you guys again just because of the echo. Okay. So here's another thing, and I just learned about this today, and I wanted to share it with you. It seems like it's going to be a million years away, but it's not. At the end of this program, you're going to write an independent research paper. You're going to take the independent research course, and you're going to write a 20 to 30 page paper that would be very similar to the one that you're writing in this class this semester. So, you know, this is all a warm-up, right? This is getting you ready for that 20 to 30 page paper that you're going to write at the end of your time here. So a couple of things to keep in mind. First of all, you can, and you're going to write papers for other classes throughout this program as well. So we're just, you know, we're working on those writing skills and warming you up and gearing you up and really getting you, you know, getting those writing skills polished. You can use the papers that you've written in other courses. You can enlarge upon those and use them for your final paper. So if you have a particular subject that you really like and you're really interested in, you know, you might want to choose that and write about that in one of your earlier classes, knowing that you can then reuse that paper. You'll expand it, right, you know, greatly, but reuse your research, reuse that sort of thinking process, and you'll be able to use that again in your independent research paper. That's one thing I wanted to say. But the main thing I just learned today is that the GW library, first of all, we've got our own, there's a librarian at the Gelman Library. Her name is Jocelyn Leventhal, and she is purely the distance librarian. So there's a whole librarian at the Gelman Library who's devoted to only taking care of the online students, just, you know, the online students' needs and the resources and things like that. And they're always looking for new ways to engage students and make things exciting for the students. But anyway, she came in to speak to, we had a college-wide program directors meeting today, and she came in and spoke to us and told us that there's a repository on the Gelman Library website. It's called Archive, like R-C-H-I-V-E. And I will post the link to that tomorrow, or, you know, today after this class. I'll post the link up in our course site. But what you can do, if you are a GW student, if you've got a GW email address, which means you're a GW student, you can use that to log into this archive, and you can post your paper on that archive. So when you write your independent research paper, you can post your paper into that archive, and that makes your paper searchable throughout the web. So let's say you write a paper on the Second Amendment, right? You write a paper on the Heller case, and the Second Amendment and the Heller case, and some person in Siberia is searching for articles on the Heller case and the Second Amendment. Your article will pop up and can be cited as a resource. So that's really, really cool. So it's a way to publish yourself in the scholarly world without having to go through actually being published by a journal. So it's a really exciting development. So keep that in mind as you're writing these papers now, and you think, I'm doing this. This is so hard. Oh, I hate this. Why do I have to do this? Blah, 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 blah. It's not a waste of time. First of all, you're learning and you're polishing your skills, and of course that's great. But beyond that, you're actually putting your scholarship out there in the world, and you're becoming part of the intellectual discussion. So that's a really exciting new development. And so, as I said, I will talk to your independent research professor about it, so he's aware of it, so that he'll know to get that worked into the class, so that he'll introduce it and make sure and remind you of it, and make sure that you get your papers publishable, get it publishing ready, so you can post those papers right up on the internet, which will make them very, very cool. Okay, so again, I'm unmuting you. Did anybody have any questions about the archive?
Yes. I have a question. So do we cite ourselves?
So you mean when you are writing your...
When we write the final paper, given that, let's say that we select one of our earlier papers and we expand upon it, we then would be citing ourselves, yes?
Well, that's an interesting perspective. You're right, you would be actually citing yourself, but I think that, technically, as far as how you would, I don't think that you would quote yourself. I don't think you would write a paper and then what you would be doing, you're not writing a new paper that you're then citing to the old paper. You're actually taking that old paper and expanding it, right? So you'll just cite to your original sources and not to your earlier paper.
Okay.
I think that would be the way to do it.
Thank you.
Sure. Anybody else?
I think that's funny because my husband is a director at his anesthesia program, and he's like, Amy, you need to be doing this. You need to pick a topic. All along, I'm like, you cannot do that. So now I have to go tell him you were right. Go get me more coffee. You were right.
I'm sorry that you have to tell your husband that he was right. I know that is extremely traumatic, and you've got to be tough and do that. But you're exactly right. So yeah, he's right. You have to be. You want to take something that you like, and if you can carry it through the program, it's going to be more fun for you to write. What you're really doing is taking 2 years to work on this paper instead of 1 semester, right? Because you're essentially working on the same topic all the way through. So that's good. That'll be, and then at the end you get to publish it, right? You get to post it. It makes it very cool. All right. So any other? You guys have any questions about that or that process or anything?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh. Okay. So then I'm going to mute you again. Let's see, what was the other thing I wanted to talk about? So I wanted to talk about the library webinar on Thursday, the reposting. Oh, and I wanted to talk about the case. I forgot the name of it again. Colby versus Hogan. All right, let me double check. Let me make sure that's the right case. Yep, that's it. Colby, Kolbe versus Hogan. I'm going to unmute you. And we'll have to deal with the echo. Has anybody read that case or heard about that case? It was just in the news. It was released February 4th. It's just 4 days old. Came out of the Third Circuit, and it addresses Maryland. And I'm not an expert on it, so I've just done a cursory reading of it. I can't give you lots and lots of detail or lots of facts about it, but now that we're studying the Constitution this week, It's Maryland. Maryland had a ban on assault weapons, on assault magazines, and it was challenged, and it went through the court system, and then the Third Circuit overturned the ban on assault weapons and said that the state legislature of Maryland, this is my cat right here. Say hello, everybody. This is Penny. She's very nosy. Anyway, there she goes. It said that the gun control law was subject to strict scrutiny. So do you guys remember what strict scrutiny is?
Yes.
So, all right, Lila, you're nodding your head. So what do we mean by strict scrutiny?
Let's see. That when the court reviews cases regarding strict scrutiny, it goes under the highest level of review.
That's exactly right. That's the highest level of review. And do you remember what the standard is for strict scrutiny? Like when the court applies strict scrutiny to a law, right? So now you remember, you guys, I'll refresh your memory a little bit. State legislatures pass laws to address problems, right? So we have a problem that, our problem is that guns are killing people, in a way that's not intended, and that assault weapons don't really serve any hunting. They're not for hunting. They're not for marksmanship. Assault weapons are really there. They're meant to kill large numbers of people. And so, we as a society don't want people to be able to kill large numbers of people really fast and really easily, right? That's the reasoning behind the assault ban weapons in a simplistic way. So the legislature says, well, so what are we going to do? How are we going to stop this? We can't ban all guns. That's not going to work. So let's ban the assault rifles because they kill lots of people very quickly. They don't really serve much of an other purpose. So let's go ahead and ban the high load assault rifles. And that's the law that they passed. So that's the problem. The problem is too many people are getting killed by guns. That in an unintended way. That's the problem. So the solution is let's ban the assault rifles. Now, having said all that, when a court applies strict scrutiny to a law, do you remember what is the standard? So the court will look at the problem that the law was meant to solve, and they'll say what? What is the law? How does the law have to be tailored to that problem? Do you remember that?
You have to further a compelling government interest.
Right. It's got to further a compelling government interest. That's exactly right. And in what way does it have to be tailored to that government interest? In what way do you remember the language that's used when we talk about strict scrutiny? So, Amy, go ahead.
Is that the substantially related one?
That's the lesser one. The substantially related is the next one down. But when we apply strict scrutiny, we say the interest has got to be a compelling interest. That's right. And the law has to be what?
Narrowly tailored.
Narrowly tailored. The only way, right. Narrowly tailored to solving that problem, to serving that compelling government interest. So in other words, it's got to be the only way we can think of to solve it, right? The only way we can possibly solve that problem is in this way. It's a really high standard, right? It's not saying like, oh, this is the best way to solve the problem. This is one way we could solve it, right? So, if you've got the lower level of scrutiny, you might say to yourself, well, we've got this problem. We could try this, we could try this, we could try this. Let's do this. This is one of many ways we could solve it. This is a good way. Let's try that one. That would be that lower level of scrutiny, that middle tier. But strict scrutiny says this is the only way. This is a compelling problem, and the only way that you can solve it is this way. So that is a very difficult standard to meet. And this is the first time that a court has applied that standard to a gun control, to a gun law. So it's really significant. You want to keep your eye on that case. Does anyone have any questions about that, or? Okay. Do you remember what's the one category that strict scrutiny applies to? Do you remember that, Jennifer? Do you know the category that strict scrutiny always applies to? The category of...
Okay, category, you mean like classifications?
Yep, classification.
Okay, I do know that religion is one. I know race is another one. I think alienage, and I know there's one more. National origin.
Right. So, and race is the big one. Race and religion are the ones that you really see and we really talk about most. So, for example, the discussion board question that we had this week that talked about the quotas, the admissions quotas in universities, that's a racial classification. That's, I mean, a race-based classification, and that's subject to strict scrutiny. Maybe I should back up and say, by the way, I sort of jumped into this and jumped right into that, but what we're talking about when we talk about the race-based strict scrutiny and the college admissions process is equal protection of the law, right? So the Constitution guarantees equal protection of the law,
Right, baby.
but not all the time, right? So the Constitution guarantees equal protection of the law unless there's a reason to treat different classes of people differently, right? So one way that you see this, that you see an exception to equal protection of the law is in affirmative action, right? So when a college says, we want a diverse student body, and if we want to have a diverse student body, we have got to take race into account when we are considering applications for admission. That's the only way we can guarantee that we're going to get a diverse student body, because if you take 100 coins and you throw them in the air and you watch how they hit the ground, they're not necessarily going to fall in a pattern that you want or that's going to be best served, right? So you just can't let randomness take over. You've got to sort of guide the way that these things, you've got to guide it a little bit. So you say, look, we as a university think that we want a diverse student body because a diverse student body is good for all of us, right? And we want to take this step. There, we feel that there's a good reason that we want to think about race in admissions. We want to take race into account as we are considering applications for admission. They can do that, but they have to have a compelling state interest, and this has got to be essentially the only way that they can solve that problem. So a lot of what the colleges are having to do, the ones that are defending race-aware admissions policies, they have to convince the court that having a diverse student body is a compelling government interest. That's where they're focusing their attention. So if they can't convince a court of that, then they're not going to be able to take that next. You don't even get to the next step and say that and our solution is the best way to achieve that.
Professor Marsh, I do have a question about the Fisher case.
Go ahead.
Okay. So when I was reading through the case, as well as reading some of the blogs on the Scottish blog, it had said that her test scores were the reason why she did not get admitted. So if her test scores were the reason, how did she even bring about a suit, and how did it get all the way up to the Supreme Court if it was based on her test scores?
That is a good question. So if her test scores, let's just assume that, for the sake of argument, so in the case and in the blog, what you read was them saying that this applicant's test scores were not as high as the minority students who were admitted.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know how that works. Does anybody else? I have to go back and look at that again, because it shouldn't. If they were indeed. I'm sorry. I'm gonna.
Well, on the the Supreme Court, I think it was in the actual document, the case document that you had given to us to read off of Google Scholar.
Right.
I believe somewhere in there, it even stated that early on in the lower courts, they had said that her test scores were the factor why she didn't get in.
Right.
And why the courts didn't even address that, why it was just addressed on the race aspect, that, is reverse discrimination towards her.
Right. Okay, so let me look real quick because I don't remember that exact part of the case. So let me take a look at this. I asked, you can still see me, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I don't remember. Okay, so she applied, was denied. She filed suit alleging discrimination. UT Austin said that, I remember. So they accept the top 10%. That's what it is. Okay. So the UT system accepts the way that the University of Texas system addressed the race-based issues was they accepted the top 10% of each high school,
right,
of the graduating class of each high school, which means that if you go to a lower performing high school, you can be in the top 10% and have lower grades than somebody in a high performing high school, right? So
okay.
I don't know, like here in my neighborhood, we've got a school called Churchill. And Churchill's like the smart school, right? Carlene, you're laughing. Are you from D.C.? Okay.
No, but I know D.C.
Okay. So Churchill's like the smart school, right? So if you're in the top 10% of if you're outside of the top 10% of your class in Churchill, right? If you're below, if you're the top 11% of Churchill, your grades are going to be higher than somebody who's in the top 10% of a low performing school, like
Okay.
Watkins Mill, right? You know what I'm saying? So it's
Okay.
So now this girl went to a high performing school, and her grades were higher than somebody who came out of a low performing school.
Okay.
Right? But so she doesn't get in because UT says we're just going to take the top 10% of every school. And that's how they're going to get not only racial diversity, but economic diversity, which a lot of people, feel is more important even than racial diversity, that you want economic and you want educational diversity, right? So you want people who are the first ones to go to college in their family. You want people who are, new to the United States. I mean, so you have, again, you have some kid who goes to an absolute top high school in one of the richest neighborhoods in one of the richest cities in the state, right? And this kid is competing against a kid who's coming out of a low performing, he's the first kid in his family to graduate from high school, goes to one of the lowest performing schools in one of the poorest neighborhoods in one of the poorest cities in the state, right? The only way that you can put those kids on equal footing is you say, if you did the best in your poor performing school, you get as good of a chance as the one who did the best in the high performing school. Do you know what I'm saying? So the girl in the high performing school, her grades would have been higher than a person who got admitted from a lower performing school. That's why.
Okay.
That's why that worked that way.
Okay.
Now, do you think that's fair?
No.
You don't think it's fair. So you think that so what do you think?
Now, when I say I think it's fair that 10%, but I don't think it's fair that she was allowed to bring suit.
Oh, right.
Because she is in an affluent neighborhood. Because there's so many, like in Kansas City, we just gone through a couple years ago, they lost accreditation up their entire school district. Did the kids ask for that? Did the kids ask to live there? No, it was not. I mean, it's the cards they were dealt in life. And so my thing is, I don't think that it was fair that she, for her to file suit just because she was in an affluent neighborhood and just because her scores might have been maybe she was in the top 20% of her, her school, but she still wasn't in the top 10. So I don't think it was fair that she filed.
Right.
That she was allowed to file and bring suit.
So
I mean, that's just my personal opinion.
No, but that's a good point. Does anybody, so how do you feel? So hi, Angela. I see you just joined us. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can't see you at the moment, but
okay.
Okay,
now
I see you.
Okay. So, Angela, have you heard this whole discussion? What do you think about that? How do you feel? Do you think that, let me, and when I say do you think that's fair, that's not a very good question because that's an emotional word. Let me ask you this. Do you think that admitting the top 10% of every school, well, first of all, let me ask you this. Do you think that having a diverse student body is a good goal for a college? So for a state school like University of Texas, which is an excellent state school, do you think that wanting racial and economic, and I don't know another way to put it, but like opportunity diversity, right? So you've got children of lawyers, children of doctors, children of college professors, and also children of mechanics and children who are of parents who are unemployed and children of people, do you think having that kind of diversity where you've got racial, religious, economic, and opportunity diversity, do you think that's a compelling goal? Do you think that's something that a university benefits from?
Well, I think it is a compelling goal, but at the same time, I find it really difficult to figure out where is the line for reverse discrimination.
Okay. All right. So, So before we get into reverse discrimination, I want to take it a step at a time. So just focusing only on the goal. Stephanie, you just happen to come up on my screen, so I'm going to ask you next. Just focusing on the goal itself. Just let's not even talk about the ways that we're achieving it. Do you think that diversity is good for a university? Or do you think it's better to have just the very, very, very smartest, highest performing kids, no matter who they are, right? Which would be the other way. Like, look, in life, the best people are going to succeed, the smartest people are going to succeed, and the fact that you've had an unfair advantage, well, like that's life. They say, that's why I don't want to use the word fair, because it's not fair, but it's life, right? So is a university better off having just the smartest kids, no matter what they look like? Or do you think that a university is better off having diversity, and that's all? Those two choices, a diverse student body, or where you're gonna sacrifice some performance, or the highest performing student body? What do you think is better for a university?
A diverse student body, because the diverse student body is a real world experience. In the real world, you're going to deal with diversity. You're going to deal with people from all different kinds of backgrounds, and it's important to know how to talk to different kind of people, how to interact with them, how to understand where they came from, culturally, economically, socially, religiously. All of those factors come into play. So I think having a diverse school is more important.
Okay, so you think it actually benefits the school, not the students, not the students who are getting in, but actually the the university as a whole.
Yes, I think it does.
So, Christina, what do you think about that? Do you think that that's a goal that's worth pursuing in and of itself, just diversity, or do you think that a university is better off, as a font of learning, better off just having the smartest kids no matter where they come from? What do you think is
Well, I struggle with it because we presume that by taking the best of the best, we're not going to have a diverse population. So it's almost like you presume that there won't be enough different races, religions, economics, and that may not necessarily be the case, right? So if you potentially have it happen more naturally, which is maybe we take the best of the best, you could still potentially end up with a diverse population. We're assuming all these people are coming from affluent white neighborhoods, and that may not be the case. Right.
That's true. So again, now we're getting into the means. I think so. So you're saying that you do think that
I think diversity can happen naturally, even if you take the best of the best.
Okay, but do you think diversity is a good goal?
I think it is because, but again, I think when you separate it, just diverse thinking, and we kind of have leaned towards diverse equaling race, and that's not necessarily the case, right? Diverse could be all different things.
Right, absolutely.
Right.
So, like I said, I mean, my daughter's our particular high school is extremely diverse, economically, religiously, national origin. Like my daughter's school, they graduated now from high school, but my local high school has a huge immigrant population. I forget how many languages. There are like 58 languages are spoken in the school. It's it's racially diverse, and yet it's an extremely high performing school. And and there was a lot of, and I think in in our local school, they call them in Maryland farms, free and reduced meals, which is essentially how you can measure poverty in your school. We have like 50% of our kids are on free and reduced meals. So we have a school. Our high school is diverse, is lots of immigrants, lots of first generation Americans, lots of poverty, lots of racial diversity, lots of religious diversity, and yet it's a very it's a very high performing school grade wise. So you're right. I mean, it's you don't have to necessarily. Okay. So anybody else have any opinion on that, on the ways that on diversity as a goal versus performance?
I should like to mention something. I think that diversity is good, but at the same time, I feel that one should not really sacrifice performance. So, if possible, in terms of our GDP and our GNP and our national security. So, for this reason, I would say, if even with the goal of having diversity, that there should be protocols and structures built in within the system, within the framework, educationally, sociopolitically, within each institution, to facilitate or to give scaffolding and support to the individuals who do not have the same background, to get them to tend toward those levels of proficiency. So in that fashion, you don't sacrifice that sense of discourse, because for how shall I put this? Discourse offers a lens on diversity, and diversity widens discourse. So with those two things in mind, if we're aiming for diversity, we also should have structures in place that offer that tweak and create optimization with respect to the individuals who do not have that same level of proficiency. So then it's a win-win as opposed to having a zero-sum game.
Right. Okay, so what you're saying, so first of all, you're saying that diversity is a good goal. We should aim for that.
Yes.
And you're okay with whatever means it takes to get those students to achieve diversity, but then you're saying, and by the way, once you get your diversity, you want to make sure that you help all of those students succeed.
Yes, because it cannot be that as a means of getting diversity that I sacrifice quality. Because if you sacrifice quality, then in essence, you don't really necessarily achieve the very thing that you set out to achieve. So we can never sacrifice quality for me, in terms of looking at the structures. So but we also need to have parity and equity. So fine, offer the means by which to get the parity and the equity. Let's take the top 10, the top 15 of each school, for example. That's a good sampling process. But knowing that there will be individuals who it's like when I used to teach certain schools, and I would recruit. If we're looking at gifted students, just because the child is labeled gifted in one school does not mean that that child is able to compete with respect to the curriculum that I or colleague would be offering, because you have different pools of children coming in. So create a situation where we want to achieve excellence. We want to give everyone a chance, the best of the best within each silo, if you will, but within each silo, you train them to be able to reach the highest level of the highest functioning silo. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you create structures within the other silos that are not as high performing. Right. So that now, at the end, everyone is able to perform at the highest level. So you're not put, the output into society is not something which is slipshod and mediocre.
Right. Well, good. That's a good point. So, I agree. I think that the support networks need to be in place once you get them in there. But that's it. That's how that case came to be. So University of Texas, decided that, I'm muting you guys just for the echoes. University of Texas decided that diversity was a good goal, and they wanted economic diversity and opportunity diversity as much as racial diversity. They chose to pursue that goal by admitting the top 10% of every school in the state, which seems like a quite like an objective way, right? You just cut it off right there. You say top 10%, whatever. What you're saying is whatever opportunity you've been given in this world, you made the best of it. So you go to a really low performing school, but you did the best you could at that school. You did as good as you could, as well as anybody could do. But anyway, so that's what they did, thinking that was a good way to achieve that. But of course, when you're doing these college admissions, it's got to be not just a good way to achieve it. It's got to be the only way to achieve it, or the best way to achieve it. But anyway, and that's how you end up with a person who has higher grades than someone else being denied admission to that elite school, and that's why she sued, and that's why it got so far. So it's good, juicy stuff to discuss. This is what con law is all about. Does anybody have any other questions about the case or any other opinions that they'd like to share? I'll tell you one thing, and this is just, were you going to say something, Lila?
Yes, I was going to say I do agree with diversity, and I think that it's good in a college setting because it teaches people empathy, so that when you get out into the real world and you have to deal with people from all economic backgrounds and such, this way at least you won't stereotype different types of people. You will be able to relate to them on another level, and everybody can learn. So I just think all around it's a good thing.
Yep. Yeah, I do think that's a worthy goal. It's amazing. You're absolutely right. I think that, all of us here at GW, and I always say this, whenever I talk to a group of my students, I say, you know what, if you are here, you're pretty fortunate. Life has been pretty good to you. If you are in a graduate program at George Washington University, life has been pretty good to you. You've done well for yourself. You are pretty darn fortunate. You've gotten this far. You are so much further ahead than the majority of people in this world. There are people who don't have a house, don't have a car, don't have a job, don't have money, might not eat dinner tonight, let alone go to grad school, right? There are people that are worried about feeding themselves today. And people in Washington, not people in Syria and Afghanistan, but people in Washington, D.C. who aren't sure what they're going to eat tonight. It's hard for us to know what it's like to be on that other side, to be that poor, to be that deprived of opportunity. So I do think I agree. I think it's good to be around people who aren't like you. On the surface, because then what ends up happening, of course, is you realize they're actually very much like you. They just have less money, right? So, but yeah, it's a good discussion, and I don't know that it's necessarily solvable. I don't know if I certainly don't think there's a right answer at this point. So, good. Does anybody have any other questions? Any questions about this topic or about the course in general, about the paper? How's everything going for that? Because we're actually coming up on 9 o'clock. Everybody good? Any questions?
I do have a question. if a person, I mean, sometimes it takes me a long time to, like, I'll reread articles like 15, 20 times and then wait and, well, I'm a little functionally neurotic. And then I will decide, oh, I'd like to say this. But then I think that I don't know if anybody will read it because when I'm ready to say something, it's like, well, the discussion, I guess, period is over. So am I able to go in and say what I want to say at that time? Because it takes me longer to mull over and think about things.
I got you. So on the discussion board. So you're saying when we post questions on the discussion board, you want to give it a lot of thought. You don't want to just jump in.
Right.
And so what you'd like to know is, I don't know. I don't know if, I mean, certainly you need to post your question. You need to post your response in time, the deadline, before the deadline to get credit for participating in that exercise. That you've got to do. Now, what you'd like to do, though, is you want to go ahead and do more reading and then jump back on and talk about it some more. I think those discussions stay open forever. Do they close? I don't even know. Has anybody ever tried to go back to last week's discussion? Was it available? I don't see it the same way you do. I see everything. So I don't know if something closes or not. Have any of you tried to go back to an old, have you tried, Carlene, to go back?
An old one to refer to something, and I could still see it. I don't know if I could still post or not, but I could still see everything.
Okay. So you can read it, but you can't post on it.
You can't post.
Well,
Okay.
it does seem like I receive notifications every time someone posts something on the discussion board, and it does seem like I get those notifications like a few days after the session was due. So it does seem like people are able to come back and follow up on previous comments. I didn't know that it closed, but it does seem like you still have that capability.
Yeah, you know what, I don't know. Like I said, I can't tell because I can see everything all the time because I run the course. I can do anything.
Couldn't she go in on the open section? Like if you wanted to post something afterwards, she could just post it to the open section.
Yeah, that's true. That's right. You could. Like you could go to just the open forum.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Thank you.
And that's probably a better idea because people check the open discussion forum all the time, whereas like once the discussion closes, people are going to quit checking the discussion board. So if you post there, nobody's going to really see it unless, like Melissa, you're set up to get the notices. That's something you signed up for. Not everybody gets those notices.
Okay.
You may not have known that you signed up for that.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
But I do it just seems like people are still able to, like I said, follow up on comments on posts a few days after it's due.
Right.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
So yeah. But that's a good idea. That's a good suggestion. Put it on the open forum and just say, like, on the subject of Fisher and affirmative action, I'd like to add this to the discussion. And, as long as you've got to get your posting on the discussion board by the deadline. That's important, so you get credit. But the follow-up stuff you can put on the open discussion. That's a good idea.
Thank you.
I just went in and tested it on the Westboro, and it let me post. I just
said
test. In case you all get it, it was me. And it just
Okay.
says test. But yeah, you can do it. But to your point, I don't know that anyone would go in then and read it. But I do get the alerts for every single thing that's posted as well. So.
Okay, good. All right, good. So either way, then I guess you can post it on the discussion board, and people will get alerts, and they will go back and read it. Or you can post it on the open discussion forum. Either way is fine with me, as long as you get that initial post, the required one, as long as you get that on the course site for your credit. That's what really matters.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Professor.
Anyone else? Any other questions before we log off for the night? Or did anybody? How are the papers going? You all feeling good about the papers?
Yeah.
Papers, yes. The IRAC assignment, I'm a little iffy.
Really?
Well, I think I got it, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
And then I thought I had it figured out which one has the two issues, but now I'm not sure on that one either.
Oh, okay. So now you're talking about for legal research and writing.
Yeah, I'm talking about legal research and writing.
Did you watch my video?
I did.
Okay, really? You sat through that whole thing?
It was kind of funny. Because in the very beginning, because the class is just sitting there and they don't even know they're being taped, and then the other professor comes in and you come in, but yeah, I did watch it.
Oh God, that's Professor Ross, by the way. That's Larry Ross. So he's the one that's going to be doing the library. I mean, it's a terrible video, but the information once you get past all that goofy stuff, the information's there. I actually have a narrated PowerPoint that I created on how to do IRAC, how to do IRAC. I'll post that on the course site.
Thank you.
Yeah, because that's important. That's important. So, Christina, if you or anybody in the class, if you want me to take a look at if you want to talk to me about IRAC, if you want to call me and just work through it, I'd be more than happy to do that. So if any of you are having trouble with IRAC, of course you can talk to Professor Morgan, of course, but you can also talk to me because I teach that on campus, and I'm more than happy. But I will post the IRAC PowerPoint. I'll put that in the professors forum.
Okay,
and
that would
then
be great.
and then that video. It's long and boring and really bad quality, but I think the information's good. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Back to the IRAC, I have mine. Hold on, baby. Sorry. I have mine pretty much done, but I need to edit it. And how do you feel about looking at it?
Be happy to.
I have chocolate milk right now. A little bit.
You're so cute.
I can email it to you, and you would give me an opinion.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Any of you. If you want me to take a quick look at it, I'll take a quick look at it. I can't guarantee that Professor Morgan will agree with my comments, but she should. I think we're pretty much on the same page. She was a student in this program originally, so I taught her, so she should agree with me. So she was in the very first online cohort and ended up a professor in the program. Wow. Yeah, that happened. So, anything else? Y'all good? Everybody good? All right, good. So I will be on the WebEx Thursday. I'll see you guys Thursday. And Thank you very much for your attention. Great discussion tonight.
Thank you.
See you Thursday.
All right. Have a great day.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.